Now, a series of nationwide strikes are being held in France, forcing the cancellation of most train services, many flights and ferries. I think we can look at a live shot, we can't just yet, from Gare de Lyon in Paris, but there it is. It is looking pretty deserted because of the strikes, which affect so many sectors. Teaching and financial unions are also walking out. The protest is against plans to increase the French retirement age from 62 to 64. Workers are expected to make greater contributions over their careers under those plans. The proposals put forward by President Macron haven't yet formally been approved by the French Parliament, but let's go to Paris now and talk to our correspondent, Hugh Schofield. Hugh, how widespread are these strikes today?
Well, in the public sector, in the areas which are regularly hit when we have these waves of protests, yes, there will be a lot of trouble and disruption. That means public transport and schools primarily, maybe also in key and sensitive sectors like electricity provision, fuel depots and so on. We'll have to see. But the big picture, as always on these occasions, is public transport, and as you say, a lot of people will be avoiding travelling around the country and around Paris today, and then schools. A lot of parents are going to have problems finding provision for their children because of schools being shut. I am among those very people. But one has to say, at the end of all this, the public sector strikes in transport don't have the same impact that they used to have. Remember, 20, 30 years ago, a big public sector strike which shut down transport in Paris was an absolute disaster. I remember them well. Nowadays, with home working, the impact on working lives is not nearly as grave, and that is a factor in all of this.
And here, give us a sense of how great the opposition is to the plans to increase the retirement age, because President Macron has tried this once before, hasn't he?
Yes, and he probably would have seen it through. It's a more ambitious plan in many ways, but the COVID came in the way, and it was decided that in the crisis that was looming, it was not appropriate to continue with that reform. But there were protests back then, just like what we're about to see now. Well, how do you measure it? Pollsters will say that it's 66, 68% of people saying they do not want this reform. So clearly there is a majority of people who are opposed. We have all the unions lined up against it. That's including the so-called reformist unions, which governments traditionally in France try to bring to their side. There's one called the CFDT, very powerful, which is the kind of hinge union. And if it comes on board, then often that means reforms will go through. CFDT is not on board. It's very angry about the failure of the last reform, which it did support, so it's with the hardline unions. And then in Parliament, all the left-wing opposition is against it. The far right, in a way, the main opposition is against it. The only ally that the government has is the conventional right, the Conservative Gaullist Party. That does mean that he can see this through Parliament, probably, but the question is what will be happening on the street before then. And today will be a test. I suspect it'll be a very, very big turnout, and at the end of the day, the unions will meet together and announce we're having another one of these next week. And it'll be one of these rolling situations which may or may not bring the country to its knees.
And what does the government say? What does President Macron say about why he believes France needs to increase its retirement age to 64, which is low by many international standards?
It is, though. In all discussions of pension age, one has to distinguish between pension age, the official age of retirement, and the number of years required to get a full pension. And there's a lot of deliberate obfuscation by people not making that distinction clear. The official age of retirement is now 62. A lot of people work longer than that because they have to work longer than that to get the years in order to have a full pension. But in any case, that's being pushed up to 64 because, as is constantly made, the point is constantly made, we are living longer, and therefore it is only fair that people work longer because the proportion of people in work compared to the people who are out of work, who are pensioners, is diminishing. Half the population will soon be pensioners. The share-out system of pensions, which France is very proud of, will not be sustainable, the government says, unless there are changes in the way that it works. One option would be perhaps to tax pensioners more, to give them less money, but that's not what they want to do. One option would be perhaps to put up the cost of contributions for employers and workers. They don't want to do that. The only alternative for the government has been to push back the age of retirement, make people work longer, and as they constantly point out, the age of retirement at 64 is still very much less than countries like Germany, where it is 67.
Hugh, for the moment, thank you very much. Hugh Schofield there on the strikes in Paris today. Let's just take you back to Gare de Lyon. We were looking at those departure boards there. There are services running, but they all look significantly delayed due to the strike action, which has cancelled so many rail services and other parts of the public transport network. A handful of people going in and out of Gare de Lyon. Still dark there in Paris, just after 8:15 in the morning, and we'll carry on bringing you what is going on in France today as the nationwide strike takes place.